Chapter 5 is looking at understanding consumer demand. And so, for us to understand consumer demand, there's really two principles that we are going to have to focus on. These principles are utility maximization and diminishing marginal utility. Now, if you remember, utility means satisfaction. So, satisfaction maximization, if you will, is when a consumer is presented with two options and they choose the one that gives them the most utility or the greatest satisfaction. So on the screen here you see Mountain Dew and coffee. I'm going to choose coffee because that gives me a greater level of satisfaction. But some of you might actually choose Mountain Dew. At the same time, there's this idea of a diminishing marginal utility, which says 1 cup of coffee is great, 2 cups of coffee is good. 5 cups of coffee are bearable, but when I get to the 20th cup of coffee, I probably am not going to want coffee anymore. So each additional cup of coffee gives me less satisfaction than the one before. We also have to look at scarcity. If resources were just abundantly available, scarcity wouldn't be an issue. But in our society and in our world, there are a limited number of resources. And so this brings about the concept of scarcity where there's deficient quantity compared with the demand needed. What happens is producers have to start to compete with each other to provide a product that consumers will want. And so this gives a lower price and usually a higher utility for consumers. But in that pursuit to have a more desirable product, producers usually are more willing to accept technologies and methods that make them more efficient, and in the long run, they become more profitable. And as a whole, scarcity creates this balance where people are competing for goods and services, and that helps to lower the cost and helps to bring a balance, which provides a greater welfare for society as a whole. But we really want to focus this week on demand. When I say demand, I'm really talking about a schedule of how much consumers are willing and able to buy at various prices. Now, effective demand really is when we talk about people who are willing and able to buy. In its purest form, I suppose demand is what consumers are willing to buy, even if they weren't able to do so. But effective demand is what we're talking about from here on out. Like at a certain price, how many units can I sell and to people who are able to buy those. So you see here, there's a demand table. So at $1, I could sell 50 units, at $2.40, at $3.30, and so forth. If I were to chart this, you see that there's a demand curve here that goes downward to the right, and this is an inverse curve, meaning as the price increases, the quantity consumed will decrease. And so the law of demand states that there's an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. That's why we get that demand curve that decreases as you approach the right. There are some factors that will affect the demand for a product. The price of the product, the seasonality, the price of competitors' products, the price of complement goods, income, population, and taste and preferences. And so if you keep those things in mind, if we move back one slide, I'm going to show you how this would look. So here, if I have a product that is $4, I can sell 20 of those items at $4. But if for some reason I need to reduce the number that I sell, I can simply raise the price by $1. Or if I need to increase the number that I sell, then I can inversely reduce the price to get the quantity of demand that I want, or the quantity of demand that I think will be most efficient for my business. But there's another idea, and that is a shift in demand, which is a change in quantity demanded at all prices in response to changes other than the goods' own price. What this means is, if you will look at the chart here, whenever we looked at the previous slide, we realized that at $4, people were going to buy 20 items. If that demand shifts so that at $4 people are willing to buy 30 items, the entire demand curve or the line shifts. So we're not moving along the curve itself moves. So things that can cause a shift in demand include the change in price of a competitor's product, the price of a complementary product. Income, population, and consumer taste can also cause a shift in demand. If you think about a few years ago, there were those little silly band bracelets that everybody was after. For a while, the demand for those was pretty high. But as consumer preferences changed, you could buy like 100 of those for $1. That's because the demand curve itself shifted. There's one more word that we need to get here, and that is a derived demand. And derived demand is when one item is largely determined, or the demand for that item is largely determined by the demand for another item. So an example would be if a farmer's fertilizer demands are changed because people have an increased desire for turkey. So in essence, there's an increase in turkey demand. So then there's an increase in corn demand to feed that turkey, which would cause an increase in fertilizer demand to grow the corn.